Welcome to our live stream, wherever you are around the world. I'll just repeat that in case you missed the beginning. Hello and welcome to our live stream, wherever you are around the world. It's 12:30 here in sunny Spain, in the middle of the day, obviously, but there are going to be a lot of viewers and readers and listeners, I'm sure, in various parts of the globe, maybe recording this or waiting to download it, and some hopefully listening to it live, watching it live as well. So welcome to our live stream in the, what should we say, the turbulence of the, the F175 launch at the O2 Arena in London yesterday. I don't know how many of you actually saw that live, and I have to confess I had a lot of stuff going on yesterday. That's my excuse. I didn't really get to see very much, but I hope those who were there, including the teams and drivers, spend a little bit of time also to go to the Formula One exhibition, which you know, is just wonderful. Had great reviews, I'm very pleased to say, and lots of history there. I'm sure everybody currently involved in Formula One has an immense knowledge of the history of the sport, and they don't really need to be taught anything at all. But nonetheless, there might have been something they might have been able to pick up. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, this is your show, so we'll get on to your questions and comments very soon. I'd just like to sort of take up a little bit of slack because I haven't actually done a stream for a while, and you might notice, eagle-eyed viewers there might notice that we're in a different location now. This is because I'm actually in a different villa now in Spain, and slightly bigger. Dexter loves it. More ground on which to prowl and protect the property, chasing away cats and birds and all those dangerous things. But yeah, we got a much bigger studio now. It's really nice. It's the first time I've been here. Hopefully it's all working. Got a hardline connection, and you can't really see it. I've got a lot of my dad's aircraft. Actually, they're in this section here, up on the ceiling here. He made, I don't know, at least 50 models, really nice models. And they're above me, hanging there. And I've got all my books here for the first time, and all my other stuff, all my other paraphernalia. So it was quite interesting going through it. I still haven't sorted all of it, but it's quite interesting going through some of the boxes that I hadn't seen for sort of 20, 30 years. No, 20 years, shall we say. That have been in storage, first in England and now in Spain. And I came across some interesting things. And one of them, I can't help just mentioning it now, is this brochure that I found. It's to do with the Haas Formula One team. And you think, oh, well, what's Peter doing with the Haas Formula One brochure? Well, of course, it's not the Haas Formula One team that you know and love today. It is the Haas Formula One team as it originally was when Carl Haas put together a Grand Prix team in 1982, and I actually helped them. I've forgotten that. I actually helped them for a while to try and raise some sponsorship. Sorry, I just lost a bit of focus. Coming back, there we go. Finding a bit of sponsorship. We put together this brochure, sort of, as it is. And it's interesting. We're talking about the key personnel of the team. Chief designer, one of racing's brightest young designers, Neil Oatley. And I don't in any way disagree with any of that, but he was the kind of chief guy there. Then there was John Baldwin, who I knew well from the Brabham days, actually, and also he'd been at Lotus and McLaren, really good guy. And then the two young guns. Look at this, Ross Brawn and Neil Oatley at the bottom there. Now, Ross Brawn is, and I read this, the appointment of Ross Brawn as the team's aerodynamicist reflects the increasing specialization required in the design and development of modern Grand Prix car, aerodynamics. And it was Ross Brawn with the background in mechanical engineering, blah, blah, blah. So there you go. And then there's young Adrian Newey, who's the newest member of the team, of the Haas team. Race engineer, Adrian Newey, responsible for chassis setup and tuning at the races themselves. So aerodynamicist Ross Brawn, race engineer Adrian Newey. How things have changed, eh? And I have said several times, have I not, that when people have said, oh, do you think Aston will be better in 2025, even though Adrian's first car won't be until the 26 car? And I've said, well, don't forget, Adrian is basically a very, very good race engineer as well. And he'll do a good job at getting as much as he can out of the 25 car. And he can't really lose, can he? Because if it's not quick, he can always blame the predecessor. And if it is quick, he can say, well, look, you know, just all he needed was a decent setup. So that was Haas, the young Adrian Newey. I thought that was quite funny. And I just came across some stickers as well, which they don't make stickers, as many stickers as they used to. Is that my imagination or is that real? I don't know. I think it's real. An original Bruce McLaren motor racing team sticker. Lovely, shiny finish. Bruce McLaren motor racing team. Got that in 72, sadly, after Bruce had passed away, but they're still giving them out to the fans. Honda, when they first started to win Grand Prix with Williams, did a sticker for every win. So that's the first win, actually, for Nigel. Obviously, Keke had won before then, but Nigel's first win there, Brands Hatch, European Grand Prix. And then following it up, immediately, every sticker was different, a bit like a Porsche poster every time Porsche won a race. That's South Africa, 85. Nice. Gilles, nice Gilles sticker. Jacobazzi obviously promoting Gilles at that point when he's at Ferrari. And here's an original Michele Alboreto Marlboro sticker that was on the type that was, well, it was one of the stickers that should have been on the side of his Ferrari, but obviously one of the mechanics gave it to me in the, in the dark hours of the morning. I was a big Michele fan and friend, actually. I hope Michele would hopefully, I was a friend to him, and he was a very good friend to me. Lovely guy. Really miss him, actually, Michele Alboreto. And if I haven't said it before, I'll repeat it. Nobody better in terms of gear changing coordination. He was absolutely silky smooth, knife through butter in every type of gearbox, Ferrari, Hewland, whatever. You could always, you didn't even have to look. You could just tell if Michele was on the track because he just had these beautiful upshifts and downshifts. Perfect rev synchronization as well. Bit of news, just to catch up on that as well. I see a company called Mercado Libre is joining Alpine as a sponsor. Watch out, Jack Doohan, because that reeks of a South American sponsor brought by Franco Colapinto. So, yeah, it's going to be edgy, that, I think, that Colapinto-Doohan face-off. I know Doohan's got the race seat, and I'm a really big fan of Jack. I love the way he drives and his aggression and his just straightforward approach to racing. But it's pretty clear, isn't it, that in the background, Flavio would love to have Colapinto in that car, and he's already out there getting money around him. I notice a lot of, is it my imagination again, or is it correct? A lot of betting companies in Formula One now, he says with a frown, of course with a frown. Why do we want betting companies in Formula One? And a lot of cryptocurrency stuff as well. I mean, I don't understand any of that, but equally, I think it's a reason I don't understand it, which is that I don't want to understand it. It's all nonsense, isn't it? And betting in Formula One, I just hope it doesn't get out of control. And then, of course, one of the things that's happened since we last spoke, Atlassian, is that how you pronounce it? Atlassian, I don't know, as title sponsor of Williams. And I love the way they say, we're being joined, title sponsor, this sponsor, that sponsor, mega thing. And then they just talk as if we know exactly who they are. A leading provider of team collaboration and productivity software. I mean, what does that mean? What are they? What do they do? It's an AI thing. I just hope that if they are in charge of productivity, that they make sure that Williams have at least a spare chassis at every race. That would be the best thing they can contribute to, I would have thought. Audi, I think, because Jonathan Wheatley obviously is very bright and very good, has said to Audi, unless you guys start doing something in the UK and tapping into the UK Formula One Silicon Valley valley, if that's, if that doesn't happen, you're never going to make it. You've got to start putting footprint in the UK. And as a result, I suspect of that, Audi have announced they're going to do some sort of UK engineering hub, which to me means, right, that'll become the Audi Formula One team in reasonable time, I would have thought. So quite a clever way of doing that, probably, and getting a lot of kudos for setting up an engineering hub. But then, it's a short step, isn't it, to going even further into the UK. So that's good. Jonathan Wheatley doing a good job there. And I noticed, this is very odd, Aston Martin have announced a sponsor called Atlas Air Worldwide. And again, we should know them. They're the world's leader of logistics and freight. Well, I find that incredibly odd because isn't DHL the official logistics partner of Formula One? And here's one of the Formula One teams, franchised to Formula One, part of the Concord Agreement, doing a deal with another company for worldwide logistics. Now, there's a parallel here because Jackie Stewart did the same thing, but it was his first year, I think, in Formula One with the team, with the Paul Stewart Racing, whatever, I think it was called, that wasn't it? Paul Stewart Grand Prix. And he had very close ties with Lord King, who at that point was chairman of British Airways. And it was completely logical to Sir Jackie that he should try to get British Airways to help him with his air freight bills. And he did that. He did a deal with British Airways to help him with freight all around the world. And Bernie said, "Oh, congratulations, Jackie. That's a great deal. How are you going to get the cars from the airport to the track, by the way?" And Jackie said, "Well, you know, normal way, freight, you know, trucks." He said, "Yeah, but, you know, we do all that and we have a contract to do all that. And we're only going to be taking freight from the airport that's been freighted by DHL. We're not going to do it from anybody else. That's part of our deal." So Jackie had to say goodbye to the British Airways deal. And I wonder whether it's the same thing today or not. And if it's not, and F1 are saying, "Oh, no, you can do your own thing as well. DHL is our logistics supplier, but if you want to do your own thing, it's no problem." You know, I'm surprised at that, to be honest, if they're going to do that. But if they are, it kind of opens the door to a lot of stuff in Formula One, doesn't it? The other big thing was that there was a commission meeting yesterday. I'm always very scared when I get these WhatsApp messages from the FIA saying, "Please see attached minutes from the commission meeting, FIA, decisions taken." I think, oh no, what are they doing to our sport next? And actually, most of them, I mean, not too bad. I'll go through them. New, more stringent deflection tests on the front wing from the Spanish Grand Prix onwards. New, more stringent deflection tests on the rear wing from the start of the season. Interesting, the front wings from Spain onwards. The teams have obviously said, "Oh, it's so complicated. We've got to design new front wings. Rear wing, no problem." But as I said, you know, that's kind of predicted. And as I said in the last live stream, that was what was going to happen. And that's how Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes basically handled the situation last year with the flexi wings on the McLaren. Instead of trying to sort of rush through their own versions, they basically put pressure, or let Red Bull really do all the pressure on the FIA to get these new rules in, as I said. And so that's happening. There's going to be a driver cooling system finalization carried out between the Formula One teams and the FIA, supported by changes that define which systems must be used. Quite sure what that's all about, really. I suppose there have been some issues with that. I mean, to me, the drivers are unbelievably fit now, and they have a lot more going for them than their predecessors. The cockpits are all big enough to take whatever size you are, and there's much better aerodynamics everywhere. But nonetheless, there's a lot of emphasis now on the cooling system. So they'll be even more refreshed when they get out of the car. There'll be no sign of sweat at all, which I think is a bit of a shame. I kind of liked the look of drivers getting out of the car, absolutely shattered, sweat everywhere. And in the days before full face helmets, of course, the black on the face. I mean, that's part of being a racing driver, in my opinion. Removal of limitations in the number of gearboxes used by teams. And then it just says, "As the reliability of current designs renders this restriction obsolete." Well, you know, we could say that about everything, couldn't we? But what about the entire power unit? They're not 100% bulletproof, are they? So why don't we just stop all that stuff and have all those, get rid of all those penalties that they keep getting when there's an engine problem, which is nothing to do with the driver. So they're getting rid of the gearbox thing now. You know, just brushing it off the table, bearing in mind it was in there in the first place because they had to save all this money by having all these gearboxes built to last 10 races or whatever it was supposed to be. And now, gone, get rid of that. Too difficult. Such is the way of politics, isn't it? A number of revisions and clarifications to sprint and race start procedures, including those covering the aborted start. Okay, I wonder if that means they're going to have a completely new start in spare cars. No, ain't going to happen, sadly. But then comes the big one, right at the end, in true Bernie style, right at the end of the thing, the most important one, by the time you're sort of half full and half asleep. Furthermore, with the aim of promoting better racing at Monaco, and they say that as if everybody wants better racing at Monaco. I've never wanted better racing at Monaco because I've never expected any racing at Monaco in the first place. It's all about qualifying, and then it's all about not hitting anything in the race, and obviously controlling the race at your own pace. And that's what we all expect of the Monaco Grand Prix. It's not a race. We've known that since the 60s. All it is a huge event brought to us effectively by Grace Kelly, who later became Princess Grace. It's just a massive event, but it's never been a real racetrack on which you can overtake back in the 60s. So got to have better racing. Well, as I say, I personally never go to Monaco expecting the racing to be good. So why do we want better racing? I think that premise is wrong in the first place. The Commission has discussed proposals for Monaco's specific regulations. And this is when you start to think, oh no, what are they going to do? The Commission agreed to increase the number of mandatory pit stops in the race. Well, I'm confused by that as well, because I don't think the rule, I may be wrong, but I don't think the rule says that you must make one mandatory pit stop now. What it says is you have to use 2 different compounds of dry weather tires. And so I think there's a confusion there. And I make that point because if it's a wet race, you don't have to make any pit stops at all. So there is no mandatory pit stop. And therefore, anything they're going to do now, and the proposals will be further discussed. In other words, they want to have 2 or 3 mandatory pit stops. But does that apply to the wet as well, for example, just as one point? But much more importantly, going back to my previous point, which is that it's not a mandatory pit stop. It's having to use 2 different types of dry compound tire. If you then say, okay, look, you've got to have at least 2 pit stops. You've got to use 2 different compounds, or you've got to have 2 different compounds, but 2 mandatory pit stops, however they want to phrase it. They are going to the soft underbelly of the Monaco Grand Prix, which is the pit lane, which is without doubt the most congested and therefore the most dangerous pit lane in the Grand Prix calendar. There's very little room for the mechanics to operate, particularly if all the cars are coming in at the same time. And it's a very, very tough weekend for the mechanics as well. So what this is basically saying is that, oh, we've got to have better racing. We can't have overtaking, so we can only do that in the pit lane. So we'll just have more pit stops, and the mechanics can live with all that. And if you have some shunts in the pit lane, I suppose that's good for TV. I guess that's what they're saying, sort of. Because I can't think of a circuit less conducive to having more pit stops rather than fewer than Monaco. Tiny pit lane, they've got a slower speed limit because of that, and it's a mess. It's always a mess at Monaco in the pit lane, and they want to have more of that. I think, you know, and I go back to my further point. They're saying we've got to have better racing at Monaco. What does that mean? Does that mean that after Charles Leclerc won the Monaco Grand Prix, won his home Grand Prix, and was standing there on the podium listening to that Monegasque anthem, and the crowd were 2-1 were either cheering or in tears from the emotion of the event? What are they saying? That actually that's not really what happened. Everybody was shouting and moaning and screaming, saying, what a terrible race. We've got to have a better race, a much better race. You know, I just don't get it. And this again comes down to this whole thing about surveys and asking the fans what they want. And yeah, of course, everybody wants a bit more overtaking if you can do it without affecting other things. But Monaco is Monaco. You're never going to have great overtaking at Monaco. Think about 1965, a long time ago now. Graham Hill's greatest Grand Prix win happened because in trying to lap a back marker, he went off at the chicane, went up the escape road, got back into the race, and then won the Grand Prix. But it was a back marker that took him off because it's so difficult to overtake at Monaco. That was 1965 in tiny little 1.5 litre Formula One cars. Think about 1992, when everybody says, oh, brilliant win by Ayrton Senna, broke the domination of Nigel Mansell and Williams Renault in the 14B, Senna at his best around Monaco. Well, the last 4 laps, from my memory, and I was in the Williams pit, was that Ayrton was doing nothing but holding up Nigel, doing it well, it's not difficult to do around Monaco. Nigel was much quicker, should have won that Grand Prix, couldn't get past because Ayrton was in front, nowhere to overtake, and yet everybody said, what a great Grand Prix, brilliant win by Ayrton Senna. You know, it's how you perceive things. And okay, bottom line, how would Windsor improve things at Monaco? I would just say improve the show by having more access than ever to the technology, the radios, and what's going on with the cars and with the teams and with the drivers. And I've floated the idea several times on live streams that we actually allow communication between the drivers in real time during the race, and just for that one race. It's Monaco specific. Let's have the drivers talking to one another on the radio. Wouldn't that liven things up without having to have an extra pit stop? And as I say, this whole thing about a mandatory pit stop is, to me, it's a weird thing, because of course it's mandatory if it's dry, but it's not mandatory if it's wet. And it's not mandatory anyway, actually, because at the moment you can go out on what is basically the formation lap, come in on your yellow tires, switch to white tires, and start the race effectively at the back of the field then, obviously. And there's your pit stop. So that's not a pit stop in the sense of what they're talking about here in the middle of the race to break it all up. So there's a lot of there that I find quite confusing and a bit annoying, really. So there we are. Yeah, I say the turbulence of the F1 thing at O2 yesterday. I've got one other thought, actually, probably a little bit, over the top of this, but let me show you a picture of a very cool looking driver on the left and one Manuel Fangio on the right. And yes, they are at Silverstone there. And it was a hot day. British Grand Prix 1950. What I'm getting around to saying is that this thing last night, this big event, was branded Formula One 75. In other words, it's now 75 years since that first season of Formula One and the FIA World Championship endorsed season, 1950. And the first race was the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. So it's kind of fitting that, I guess, that this event took place in Britain, in England also. But the reason I show you that picture is because that guy on the left is Johnny Claes. And he was a very, very cool dude. Can I say that? Because he was a musician. He was a jazz musician. He had a really good jazz band called Johnny Claes and the Clay Pigeons, spelt C-L-A-E. His name was C-L-A-E-S. And he was hit, he was hip at the time. And if you go to Spotify now, you can find his music. I find it odd, actually, and remiss that at some point in what was obviously quite a music-orientated event last night, that they didn't make reference to that. Because Johnny Claes wasn't slow as a Grand Prix driver, and he had a great jazz band. So why didn't they just play a little bit of Johnny Claes music at some point, just to acknowledge that? Going back to 1950 British Grand Prix, would it have been that difficult? I don't know, probably. Okay, let's go to some questions. First is, and here I am expecting stuff about the F1 75 event at O2. It's very straightforward. Hi, Peter. How would you compare Carlos Reutemann with Alan Prost? Well, if Carlos was here now, and very sadly he's not, but I've got a million magazines and books and pictures of him everywhere around here, he would say, Prost, you're very, very good. Much better than Reutemann. I have no chance against Prost. This guy is unbelievable. I think he would think in his mind, for a start, Prost was exactly the right shape, or is exactly the right shape to be a Grand Prix driver, and Carlos, was too tall. At times when the chassis was not built around a template, and if you were a tall driver, you stuck out of the cockpit. And if you look at the pictures of Carlos versus even Alan Jones in the Williams 07s, you can see Carlos sitting higher in the car. So that's the first thing. He would say, Prost massively lighter and smaller, so huge advantage there. Definitely both short corner drivers, both turned in on the brakes, and both tremendous feel. I would say Carlos quicker and definitely better in the wet and more able to do one lap just blindingly fast on the very, very ragged edge of a short corner driver with perfect manipulation, sort of Max Verstappen edge. Whereas I think Prost, after his period at McLaren, that first year when he was a bit frightened by the car braking all the time, and then the sort of Renault politics, by the time he got back to McLaren and he was alongside Nicky, I think Prost found a zone of operation which never took him into the sort of ragged edge area. So that's why I say I think Carlos over one lap would have been quicker. But obviously, as a racing driver, thinking through the year, working with the team, politics, getting yourself in the right car at the right time, Prost definitely had the advantage over Carlos in that area. But one lap, I'd give it to young Carlos Reutemann, sadly missed these days. Okay, that was one question. Thank you very much. And she's asking another one. I say she, sorry, maybe he. Sarosh Soman says, hi, Peter. Have you sat with drivers like Prost in road cars? Any insights on this experience, please? Gear changes, heel and toe. Well, it's funny you should ask that, because I was talking a bit earlier about Michele Alboreto and his gear changing and how good he was. And yeah, of course, sat with many of them in manual transmission cars at a time long before sequential shifts and paddle shifts and everything else. And I mean, Nicky, very good example, was absolutely perfect. I've mentioned this before. Absolutely perfect at having the minimum amount of revs to make a car move. So in other words, it was never, it was always, it was exactly the right amount of revs. And he always had the clutch absolutely perfect, even in a shabby road car or leaving the garage in his 312, B Formula One car. So, or T, but it'd be better, 312T. So yeah, and heel and towing. Saw who was the best guy? So Carlos heel and towing when he drove my Fiat 131 Mirafiori Sport, great car, orange, black wheels, you know, rally spec car, around brands in the wet. There was a lot of heel and toeing there, and it was just, everything was, the thing that always struck me is that they always seemed to have lots of time, and it was and yeah, I mean, clutch was perfect, gear shift was perfect, didn't miss a shift, didn't miss a clutch movement, or didn't over rev it in any way, or under rev it even, and just incredible feel. And I always think it's the people that, I don't think it matters. Let me restart that. We have an opportunity today, thanks to Pirelli, for these hot laps, and various people are given the opportunity to ride with, occasionally with really good drivers, current Grand Prix drivers indeed. But it's all left foot braking, sequential shift, paddle shift, and I just don't think they get the same insight, and it's a bit of a shame, really. And I was actually thinking yesterday, when this whole F175 thing was on at the O2 and the music and all that stuff, that the alternative, of course, would have been to have gone to the site of the first Grand Prix. It would have been wet, would have been cold, but who cares? To Silverstone. And for the fans, had, I don't know, 25 road cars there. And you could have, okay, it wouldn't have been 15,000 because that's how many were at the O2, but you certainly could have had a reasonable number of people out there sitting next to Grand Prix drivers doing laps, in the way that we were very lucky to do as journalists in the 80s, thanks to Goodyear, 70s and 80s. And actually seeing the drivers up close doing what they do, rather than standing on stages trying to be funny or whatever they're trying to do, be cool, I think it's a shame we don't do more with the drivers, because that's what they do. That's who they are. You know, we've gone through this before with the whole Max Verstappen swearing thing, and I've said, you know, it's not actually Max's fault, because all he is a racing driver. It's all he's ever done, and he's heard people swearing at karting level, let alone now in Formula One, and he just does it. So does Yuki Tsunoda. You know, they do it. It's up to the teams, the media divisions, which are all overstaffed and probably overpaid as well, to control that, and that's what should be happening. That's where the fine should be imposed if there is a breach of that. But you know, it's a shame that we don't get to see the drivers doing what they're doing, like Max. You know, I'd love to sit next to Max in a road car at some point, see what his hand-eye coordination's like, and foot-hand coordination as well. But, you know, I don't know. It doesn't happen, does it? Just on that, can I just mention Elfyn Evans, please? For those of you that haven't heard of him, he is a very, very shy, withdrawn. No, not well withdrawn. He's just low profile, shy, very skillful driver who just happened to have won the Rally of Sweden last weekend, which makes it, for Elfyn Evans, out of the last 3 rounds of the World Rally Championship, he's had 2 wins and a 2nd place. Unbelievable. Drives for Toyota. And in Sweden, he beat the likes of Taka Katsuta, the Japanese driver in the Toyota team, Kalle Rovanperä, double world champion, and his young upstart, you know, mega Finn, Sami Pari. And he drove really, really well. He beat all the Hyundai drivers as well. I thought he was brilliant under pressure, absolutely superb. So here he is. He's basically comes from a Welsh country background, very low key, very, very retiring, I suppose. And he's not out there on social media doing his thing. I thought it was absolutely, what's the right word? Deplorable, as Rob Walker might say at this point, that the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, always on the search for British success athletes, whether it be Tour de France, whether it be Wimbledon, whether it be football, whether it be a million other sports, cricket, always on the thirsty for anything good news, didn't mention at all Elfyn Evans winning the Swedish Rally of Sweden. I say Swedish Grand Prix because what he achieved actually is the same as Yuki Tsunoda winning the Bahrain Grand Prix. It's no less, no more, you know. Unbelievable achievement by Elfyn Evans, but no mention at all. And I find that it's not just that nobody's interested in rallying. It's just pathetic, really, that people don't take the trouble to understand what's going on out there and how skillful these guys are and the achievement they have. So anyway, just wanted to say that. Next one. Aaron Lee. Hello, Aaron. You're a regular, so welcome to the show. Thanks very much for your joining us. Hope it's a happy question, he says, before he reads it. Hi, Peter. Do you think the overall level of driving standards and driving skill ability is affected in periods of high driver turnover like this year? What about past years? So what we're saying is, because there's a lot of new drivers coming into Formula One, just seems to be a high turnover at the moment, is that affecting the overall level of driving standards and driving skill? No, I don't think so, Aaron. I still think a great driver is a great driver. And I'm talking here, Max, Lewis, Charles at the moment. There'll be others joining that group, I'm sure. But I do think that the standard of driving in general is probably higher than ever before because of all I'm talking about the midfield now, all of the sims, all of the data acquisition you can have, the cross-referencing to your teammate. It's actually, and I say this, it sounds presumptuous, but it's not that difficult to be a very fast Formula One driver now. It's incredibly difficult still to be a great Grand Prix driver, doing things almost at perfection. But to be there or thereabouts, let's say within half a second, it's not that difficult. Whereas I think 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, you would say it's not that difficult to be within a second and a half of the pace, but to be within a second. Now I'd say that second has gone down to about half a second. They're all braking late. They're all getting on the power at the right moment, given a sort of classic racing line. They're all doing things pretty well, as the engineers would want them to do it, controlling the car with a lot of stuff on the steering wheel as well. Don't forget the active differentials that the cars still have, thanks to John Sutton. And so I don't think it matters. And I think in reality, the more the next generation comes through, the higher the standard of midfield driving. Now, the question is, are any of these new guys, whether it be Liam Lawson, whether it be any of them, Jack Doohan, Ollie Behrman, any of these new guys, which one and do any of them have the potential to be as good as a Max or a Lewis or a Charles? And that's a good question, and it's an interesting question, because I don't think the engineers of the teams, and I keep saying about the engineers because they seem to be the ones in charge of the drivers these days, their development, think in those terms. They just think in terms of what they want the driver to get from the car, and they don't differentiate between the way a Lewis or a Max would go into a corner from the way a Carlos Sainz or an Ollie Behrman goes into the corner. So that is still a black art, really. And I still think that is something that's not affected in any way by the influx of new talent. It's just, if you're very, very good, it will show through. As with Nigel Mansell, everything was against Nigel in terms of becoming a Grand Prix driver, and yet he was so good that when he did get his chance in 1980, 81, he was just fabulous. Not many people even saw it then, but he was, trust me. Same with Ayrton, Anyway, good question, Aaron. Long answer. David Gibson. Absolutely amazing. They should do it every year. Loved it. Okay, well, there's our first response to the F175. They should do it next year. Good. Good to have that input, David. Thank you. Desktop bodybuilding. Hi, Peter from Tasmania, Australia. G'day, mate. Yeah, got quite a lot of friends in Tassie, and in fact, I was communicating with one this morning on WhatsApp. So I hope all's well there with that lovely part of the world. It's a beautiful, beautiful island, Tasmania. I don't know how many viewers, listeners might have been there, but it's Australia, but it's Australia with a lot of seasonal changes, beautiful countryside, lovely harbour in Hobart, Launceston, beautiful too, and of course that fabulous old road circuit, Longford. Alex G says, nice you're back, Peter. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, just to explain again my slight absence, I suppose, it's because I've been doing all this moving, and I still haven't really got through to a decent filing system. I don't know how many people out there have still got a lot of CDs and DVDs and tapes, but I have, because I just never threw anything away, and not quite sure what to do with them all. But I've got some all stacked now, and I've got them pictures. I mean, the nice thing about CDs and even LPs actually, and EPs, I've got lots of those. Oh, getting a bit old here, Peter. Is the pictures you got with them. They're just fabulous, aren't they? So I've got them on display sort of thing on some of these shelves. Sooner or later, I'll sort of do a video of all the shelving I got here because you can't really see what's going on. But yeah, lots going on and coming across some really nice stuff. I mean, I came across a video yesterday, which I bought. I don't know when I bought it. It was a video of the 64 Austrian Grand Prix. Brilliant stuff. Lorenzo Bandini winning his only Grand Prix win. And Kit, been a while. Hope you're doing well, Peter, and geared up for the new season. Well, yeah. I mean, not only am I geared up, I've been gearing up because we've already had 2 rounds of the World Rally Championship. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to, if I isolate you, I'm sorry. But for me, the skill of those rally drivers is so high that I have to watch every rally now, and I have to see what's going on, and I just sit back and watch in awe, and as I do Formula One, and I just think both of them are great. And we've had 2 rounds already, so fabulous. Desktop Bodybuilding says it was a surprisingly pretty decent O2 event. Good, that's good. Well, I mean, it was always going to be decent, wasn't it? It was always going to be better than decent because it's Liberty, and they know what they're doing in terms of a presentation, music and acts and doing things well. So all credit to them. And to Stefano Domenicali, hats off yet again. Good job. But let's have some Johnny Clays, maybe at the British Grand Prix. There we go. Johnny Clays and the Clay Pigeons. Alex G, hope you're going to make a podcast with Lewis. Yeah, well, I've sent about 27 missives to Ferrari saying, can I do a podcast with Lewis? No reply to any of them. So then I tried a different tack and I said, can I do an interview with Dino Beganovic, thinking, you know, I'll start a little bit lower down the tree. No reply to that either. So I'm not quite sure what to say about that. And, you know, I'm not saying this because, well, I'm not saying for any reason other than I think it's true. I think if I could actually, if Lewis, somebody said to Lewis, oh, Peter Windsor wants to do a podcast with you, Lewis, it'll take about half an hour. He just wants to talk about lots of mega things to do with racing and driving. He'll probably say, yeah, great, let's do it. But because it's got to go through 27 different fences, it'll never happen, I don't think. The black beams on the white ceiling look awesome. Thank you very much. They're actually, yeah, they are black, yeah. And so we're in Spain. It's a Spanish type villa. And I'll give you the geography. The pool is out there. I've got those blinds down because those doors open straight onto the pool. It's a sort of C-shaped villa, but with squares rather than round corners that a C would have. And we're in one of the wings. This is the entire wing of one side. I measured it actually. It's about 90 square meters. So that's the space I need to have all my stuff in one place and reasonably get atable. It's quite a lot of stuff, isn't it? I think that's the case. I've probably got some, and I've got a big garden now, and I've got 2 cars out on the lawn now, which the cars look great on grass. I've always said that before, going back to the old Warwick Farm days. Just see the Hyundai sitting there on the grass, looks great. Sean M says, have you read every book? Well, some of them you can't read. That's my excuse because they're picture books. But no, I have to say no. A few of those books have been given to me over the years by publishers, and I've thought, not sure I would have bought this, and it's gone up there just to be there. But for example, I've got, I don't know, I'm just looking over there, Churchill's 6-volume history of World War II. I've read all those. I can put my hand over. Charlton Heston's diary, yeah, read all of that. Arthur Haley, The Evening News, yeah, read that back in the 70s. Debbie Reynolds, My Life, yep, read that. Track Pass, Jeff Goddard, his photography, yep. Brian Redmond, read that. Roy, what's it say? Yeah, it just says Roy, Andrew Simons, read that. That's when I was a big Andrew Simons fan. Sadly, Andrew no longer with us. The 2 Lotus volume history books, read those. The Golden Age, Gore Vidal, lovely novel, loved that. We've got a super chat here. Thank you very much. This is from, what do you think? This is from M.A. Khan. Thank you very much, M.A. Khan. Let me just get that. Where are we? A little bit higher. There you go. The magic of, how's that? About there. Perfect. What do you think about Oscar's team saying they've changed Oscar's approach last season by focusing more on Lando and his style rather than looking at other drivers? Has he changed from short corners? Well, it's really interesting that they've said that, because I hadn't heard that. Not that, I don't actually, well, I've just been busy doing other stuff. I hadn't heard that. But I think you'll recall it's exactly what I've been saying about Oscar's driving in the second half of the year, that he seemed to have lost his feel for short corners, and he seems to be sort of going the Lando way of driving. And I've said what a shame that is and what a mistake that is, because that's what he's got, that natural ability to get into a corner quite early and to be sensitive enough to live with the understeer and get his rotation at exactly the right moment, as distinct from the geometrical apex, is a God-given talent that you shouldn't play around with. And I think it's a huge mistake if McLaren are saying, oh no, you got to go Lando's way. Brake more in a straight line, get into the corner a little bit later, get on the power sooner, whatever they're saying, higher minimum speed, some rubbish like that. And I think it's a great shame. And indeed, I was mulling all over this mulling the event over, this Formula 1 75 event over with a mate the other day, saying, these are the questions that I would ask all the drivers if I was out there. And the question I was going to ask Oscar Piastri was, now that you've seen that going the route of the Lando way of driving isn't actually giving you any sort of advantage, have you been spending the winter going back to making sure that you're perfecting now what you can do with short corners and looking a lot more to go in the direction of Max and Lewis? That's what I would have said to Oscar Piastri. He probably would have looked at me as if I was mad and not replied, but it's a good point that you make there. And I think it's a great shame if that's what's happened. And I hope Oscar's had the ability and got the brains to say, no, I'm going to do my own thing. One thing I would say here is that Mark Webber is, I imagine, still very close to Oscar. And he definitely was a Lando type driver in the way he approached corners. And so probably he would be backing that. I'm only putting 2 and 2 together, maybe getting 5. But I suspect Mark probably says the same thing. But I hope we'll see when the season starts how Oscar drives, because he definitely had an advantage over Lando. And the minute he started to lengthen his braking areas and brake later, he's just trying to beat Lando on Lando's own terms, and that's going to be very difficult for him to do. And maybe that's what McLaren want, obviously, because then Lando's more able to be dominant because he does everything so well. And there's still one thing Lando does a lot better than Oscar, and that is that business of coming out of the brakes and throttle on a really quick corner under pressure. And it's a wonderful thing he has that Max does. Lewis, we haven't seen Lewis do that very much in the Merc in the last 4 years, but it's certainly something that Max does as well. Because you never know on the soft tire exactly what the car is going to do when you're doing that final lap and you've got, the checkered flags coming out at the end of the lap. And the way Lando gets around that problem is to go into the corner and just a little bit too quickly and then just let the car settle and let the grip of the soft tire settle the car. And it's an incredible talent that he has, and that's where he was doing Oscar last year. So if Oscar is starting to do that and is learning from Lando on that point, then that's great. Even so, all he can do is be as good or match Lando. If he went back to short corners, he'd then be doing something very different from Lando, and that's what I think he needs to do, in my opinion. If I was running Oscar, that's what I'd be saying to him. Thank you for that. Indigo Blue. That season opener yesterday was so cheesy, really cringe. Well, we got some different opinions there, haven't we? Indigo Blue doesn't agree with some of our viewers, prior viewers. All I would say is, where was the Johnny Clay's music? So there you go. Sean M. 2 of the best ever to do it. I think we're talking about Prost and Reutemann there. Seema Dragun, hi Peter, great to see you. And go back to Sean, yeah, I agree with you. 2 great drivers. Sean M, Gordon Murray was great too. Well, yeah, Gordon Murray was an excellent, I'm trying to think of something to do with Gordon that came up the other day when I was doing some unpacking. But anyway, yeah, Gordon, excellent Grand Prix car designer. Very creative, very courageous, I would say, and very imaginative, very detailed, very lucid, easy to talk to. And how many Grand Prix car designers have then gone on, forget the McLaren F1, have gone on to design beautiful houses? Gordon has. Incredible. Bain, can you predict the 25 driver standings? Top 5. Might come back at the end of the thing. I was going on it before about it. It's too many betting companies in Formula One, so going to be, you know, I'll be sidestepping on that one. I just, you know, if it's logical and all the teams are basically, I would say all the teams, the top teams, if McLaren, Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes are more or less equal now, I would say drivers champion Charles Leclerc. And we want something different from the norm. It can't be boring, right? You can't do the predictable thing. And I would say constructors champion Red Bull. Just to be provocative. No, anyway, that'll come back to me. I think I did a prediction in the last live stream. I can't even remember what I said now. It changes. It changes. But I don't think we should read too much into what's going on in any of the testing that'll be coming up. Wait for the first race. Wolf Hunter, it was all very American, he says. Yeah, well, what do you expect? It is all very American. That's the trouble, isn't it? So, no, it's not the trouble. That's the beauty of it. Wonderful. The only thing, going to the expo at the end of February. Okay, good. The only thing I would say is that I think Formula One should not be guilty of copying other sports if they do season previews and stuff. They should do everything that feels logical in their own way and not try to copy football or anything else. Sean M. Jack's dad is a MotoGP legend. Well, he is. He's a total legend. Mick Doohan. Just incredible. You know, I put him up there in the Carlos Sainz senior bracket of greatness. Total and meganess. Yeah, lovely guy too. Zishan Afsar says, hi Peter, how do you think George will deal with having a younger and very rapid teammate in Kimi? By being quicker and beating him? Yeah, I think he will. George is very quick. But it's another one there. I mean, Kimi to me has a bit of an Oscar Piastri ability to get into a corner early. But whether or not Mercedes knock that out of him mid-season and say, look, if you want to beat George, drive the way George drives, then that'll be the last we see of Kimi probably. So if on the other hand they say, wow, this guy drives like Lewis, mega, short corners, all the rest of it, let's really massage this wonderful talent, then occasionally George is going to have something to think about. But overall, I'd be absolutely shocked if George isn't the dominant driver in that team. No disrespect to Kimi. As I say, I think Kimi does have an amazing natural talent, but for short corners. But George is super quick, totally confident, and you know, loving every millisecond. Why isn't he going to be blisteringly fast everywhere? Same questioner. Norris v Piastri this year with a potential title-winning car from the start of the season. Do you think one should be prioritized over the other to avoid a repeat of last season? Well, I do, because it's, you know, it's very difficult for Lando to beat Oscar Piastri if Oscar is, all things being equal. But as I say, if Oscar hasn't developed his ability to drive with shorter corners than Lando, and he's sat around all Australian summer, European winter, saying to himself, oh, I'm going to drive like Lando, studying his telemetry, I'm going to brake later or get the power on sooner, or whatever he thinks he's going to do, then he's never going to beat Lando. And maybe McLaren are much more clever than we ever thought, or I gave them credit for. Maybe their way of saying to Lando in Hungary last year, think about the championship, Lando. If you want us behind you for the championship, give this win to Oscar now. Maybe what they're really saying was, and what we're going to do starting Monday morning, we're going to tell Oscar to try and drive like you and ruin his talent, and therefore he'll never be in a position to beat you again. Maybe that's what was going on. Probably was, actually. Maybe they're much more clever than we thought. So, you know, one thing's for sure, Zach Brown will want Norris to win the championship this year rather than Oscar, I think, if it was one or the other. And then he'd very quickly say, oh yeah, and Oscar can win it the following year. A bit like, you know, Gilles Villeneuve was going to win the World Championship in 1980. But as I say, you know, Lando, I think, would find it very difficult to beat Oscar Piastri over a season if Oscar has really honed and developed and polished his short corner ability. If, however, Oscar has not done that over the European winter, then I think Lando will naturally have a domination over him. Because the best Oscar can ever be is about as good as Lando then. It's a shame if that's happened, because Oscar's pace until now has been his ability to create shorter corners when he's been quicker than Lando and when he was good in F2. Was it cringeworthy? The launch, I mean, says Folksy Deo. Ferrari HP white, not beautiful, says Apopapava. No, it's never been very beautiful, that, has it? I liked it when they went to blue, but all those white blocks and stuff just don't work on a Ferrari, in my opinion. 100% agree with you there. And I found it also quite amusing that all the teams are saying, and we announce our 2025 livery. And you think, well, it's the 24 livery, isn't it? And what happened to B spec cars as well? Nobody has a B car anymore. So you can't have a McLaren MCL 38B. It has to be a 39, even though it's a 38B. No, I can't have a B anymore. Stanley says about Monaco and how to make the racing better. They should make it a long straight after the tunnel. Yeah, well, let me think about that. How would that work in terms of runoff area going into Tabac? I think it'd be a bit of an issue, wouldn't it? Yeah. Apo Papava, FIA, boo-ha, as worth it at the launch. Not quite sure if that's positive or negative one, but anyway, I've read it out as it's written. Apo Papava continues by saying FIA should be increasingly worried, becoming unpopular year by year. But did the FIA have much to do with the launch last night? It was mainly Liberty, wasn't it? I know they were celebrating the FIA's World Championship, but in terms of the launch and probably the whole idea of doing that, the livery launch, wasn't that a whole Liberty thing? Anyway, I think the FIA president needs to go and watch a few rallies, to be honest, just to get reality check. Simon K, the FIA shouldn't be popular or noticed. Okay. Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, they're just administering the sport, aren't they? They are. They're administering the sport. And so therefore, let the sport speak for itself with the administration. That's what you're saying. Whereas constantly the FIA are trying to be very popular, aren't they? You're right. You know, I hadn't really thought about that. Why? I don't know. Egotistical stuff, I suppose. Politicians thinking they're in a politically strong position. I don't know. Don't understand all that stuff. Politics, ego. The halting problem, Pittsburgh. There's a good name. Hi, Peter. Do you think Mercedes will pull out of Formula One after 26 if they fail to field a competitive car? That's a good question, isn't it? They've pulled out of Formula One several times before. Usually, well, they pulled out in 55 because of not only the Le Mans disaster, I guess Dundrod TT disaster as well. But anyway, disasters, Mercedes going into the crowd, striking the crowd, and 80 odd people being killed. And so they pulled out of the sport, and then they came back, mainly thanks to Norbert Haug, who is one of my guys that I think is very underrated and should be given more credit for what he did. And here they are. And I suppose the other point that should be made is that when they have been in racing before, pre-war and even indeed pre-First World War, they were always mega successful. And they always pulled out, putting 55 to one side, they always pulled out, well, let's look at it. 14, they were mega quick, and they just won that French Grand Prix, and then World War I started, so that was that. World War II, they were mega quick. Sadly, it ended with Dick Seaman's accident at Spa in 39, but they were right on top of it, and then they were unable, I think the FIA or stroke some major European Sports Commission, as part of Germany's penalty, were not allowed to field a Grand Prix team until the mid-50s, and they came back and dominated everything. 54, and then 55, the Le Mans disaster, and then they came back. So they've always been very good, and they've never been in a position where they're getting consistently beaten until now. So that's the point we're getting around to making. And the question is, how much control over things like that do Mercedes have? Because Mercedes may say to Toto Wolff, you're doing a lousy job, we want to pull out of Formula One, and Toto will say, that's fine, let me buy the whole Mercedes powertrain division from you, I'll find a sponsor for that, and I'll take over the team 100%. It'll all continue, wouldn't it? And with Mercedes engines and everything, I'm not sure they're just there, but they're not actually doing anything anyway, technically. So just means they basically, the team would lose sponsorship if that happened in reality. And I'm sure, I mean, the one thing Toto's very good at is raising money. So he should be able to cover that, go and get one of these investment bank things, cryptocurrency companies to come and finance it all. Mass Vassassin, less so with those massive cars. I think he's saying about Monaco. Well, all I'm saying is it was impossible to overtake at Monaco in 1965. So what's new? We've had some great races at Monaco, haven't we? Especially in the wet. You know, we should never discount the reality that Monaco could be wet each year. And Monaco has produced some brilliant races in the wet. Jean-Pierre Beltoise, Olivier Panis, to name but two. Cameron David, great event yesterday, should bring some more fans to the sport of Formula One. Got enough already, haven't we? Want more? Okay, good. Bigger and better, grow the sport. KCB 5150, what do you think about deleting the Nouvelle Chicane to make some sort of racing at Monaco? Well, the problem with that, I mean, they've made the chicane slower and slower and tighter, is because they come out of the tunnel and it's, the car's very light and the track is not straight there, it's curved. So you're coming out of there. So then what we're saying is we just have a long straight up to Tabac. And then Tabac would be an unbelievably quick entry, and there'd be a massive drama about runoff area there. You could put in a faster chicane, but the reason they went to the faster chicane is that it was so dangerous to have a fast chicane where you can make a mistake and go into the harbour. So they got the slow chicane. So I don't think there's much you can do there. I don't think there's much you can do anywhere around the circuit of Monaco to make it better. But I question the whole raison d'etre of wanting to have better racing. What does it mean? What does it mean? The racing was brilliant if you like a big occasion and an emotional win and Formula One cars looking outrageous on a piece of public road. That's what Monaco gives you in a nutshell. And what's wrong with that once a year at Monaco? You know, the greatest part of the south of France at the same time as the Cannes Film Festival. I mean, everything's just totally brilliant there. Why mess around with that? That's my point. Alex G. So if you start as a back marker at Monaco, pit on the first lap, well, as I say, yeah. And then what happens if it's wet anyway? Would somebody answer that question? Still going to have to make 3 pit stops in the wet? JD himself, counterpoint. Everybody was excited because Ferrari and Leclerc, the cars are too large and too long for this track. Okay, improving technology, but this is not a 2025 6-meter long car track. No, it's not. But then again, it's not a track that's on the calendar because it produces great motor racing. If you want great motor racing, go to one of those new circuits with massively long straights and 3 DRS zones. As you're racing, 1 race out of 24 or whatever it is, does it matter that we're just going there as part of the past and the heritage of Formula One to a place called Monte Carlo, which Grace Kelly allowed to blossom into this huge event? Does it matter that we do that once a year? Shop window of Formula One, as they like to call it. I mean, in the shop window of any big store, the dummies don't move, do they? They're just there looking beautiful. It's a bit like Monaco. So, have we got that? Yeah, just looking at another super chat, but I don't think it was actually. JD himself. The historic Monaco Grand Prix was quite exciting, but again, they were not driving aircraft carriers. No. Well, no, I mean, you can go on and on about this. Of course the cars are too big, but they're too big for other circuits as well. Too big and heavy. As I keep saying, you know, my road car, 1965 Lotus Elan S3, is lighter than a current Formula One car. It's ridiculous. Simon K. Pirelli hold the keys to good racing. Well, they do and they don't. Remember that the reason Pirelli wanted to have, or the reason Formula One, Bernie, allowed Pirelli to produce 2 compounds for racing, in other words, to have 1 pit stop in the dry, was because it made the technical job easier for Pirelli. They didn't have to build a tyre at every circuit that would do the full Grand Prix distance. They made the job easier. That's how this whole thing started. And along the way, Bernie thought, oh, it'd be quite good to have a few pit stops as well. You know, a bit of drama in the pit lane, always good for Formula One. And here we are. So it's not really Pirelli. Pirelli love the idea of producing tyres that only last half a Grand Prix or a third of a Grand Prix distance. But how are they going to do that? If they say you've got to have 4 mandatory pit stops in the Monaco Grand Prix, are Pirelli going to build race tyres that only do 20 laps? Or what is it, less than that, you know, 18 laps? I don't think they are. That's a lot of tyres to have to build now, isn't it? Isn't it counterproductive to do that? And then again, going back to my point, what happens in the wet? Greetings from Serbia from Stefan Jasimovic. Since after World War II, drivers were former pilots. Would pilot training help drivers today? Good question. I mean, I think the opposite. I think Grand Prix drivers could probably help current fighter pilots with a lot of the way they think and their reactions and their balance and their self-discipline. And we saw that. We saw that even back in World War One, prior to in 1914. You know, Georges Boyot won. He didn't win that French Grand Prix, but he'd won 2 or 3 French Grand Prix, and he was a French hero. Should have won, or could have won that 14 race, but his what was it? I think it was a, I can't remember what it was, a French car anyway, blew up. Probably a Renault. No, maybe not. Being unkind, blew up on the last lap. Anyway, that was 1914, and he went off and enlisted in the French Air Force and became an ace fighter pilot overnight, effectively, in the French Air Force. Sadly lost his life over the Somme a couple of years later. But he was an absolute ace, adapted immediately to flying. And Louis Rosier, similar thing. So a lot of good pilots, and a lot of Grand Prix drivers have always loved the idea of flying their own plane, particularly obviously going back to the 60s with Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart. Not Jackie. Jackie decided not to do that. Jack Brabham, Colin Chapman, Innes Island. Yeah, they're all pilots. They all loved it. And I think that, I mean, Jimmy went solo in 15 hours at Bankstown Airport. And that was one of the fastest periods ever for anyone to have gone solo, let alone in Australia. His talent in adapting to flying was just incredible. Nigel Mansell, the same. He went, I think he was something in the 15, 16 hours as well. Very, very quick adaptation. And Nigel then got his helicopter pilot's license as well, didn't he? So I would say all Grand Prix drivers, in reality, if they put their mind to it, would be very good pilots. I'm not sure all pilots will be good Grand Prix drivers. So in reality, a lot of pilots could actually benefit from having dinner with a Grand Prix driver periodically and just picking their brains. M.A. Khan. Hi, Peter. Great to see you again. Thank you very much. Is age just a number? In 94, Mansell was 0.6 quicker than Hill at Adelaide, despite being 42 and out of shape. Should Williams have kept him? It's a good point, isn't it? I mean, a great driver is a great driver. Look at Alan Jones. I mean, he wasn't exactly svelte even when he was at his peak in 80. So all this stuff about driver cooling suits, you know, they didn't have cooling suits back then, did they? Keke was the first one to have one in 84 Dallas when he won. And I'm surprised that they're doing so much on this commission thing. I didn't realize they were having so much trouble with those cooling suits, but they all walk around with those cooling vests beforehand, don't they, on the grid, and they all got the air buds and the drink bottles and all that stuff. You've got to be a Grand Prix driver. Got to have the earbuds in there, listening to music that nobody's allowed to talk to you. That's all you got to do. It's a bit like going on the golf range today. If you're a good golfer on the way up, you've got to have your earbuds, and you've got to have your mobile phone that you go to every fifth shot and talk to for 10 minutes. Incredibly important conversation with your manager or whatever. It's the same with Grand Prix drivers. You've got to have the drink bottle, got to have the earbuds, got to have 10 people around you, making sure nobody talks to you. It's pathetic, isn't it? Mrs. B, the show was so ridiculous I turned it off. Well, there you go. You see, a lot of pros and cons, aren't there, on this one? Folksy Deojeo, it affects their understanding of each other. I'm not sure what that refers to. Sorry about that, mate, but I'm sure you're right. Nicholas Micheletti, hi Peter. I recently listened to an old Charles Leclerc interview back in 2018. He named Alex Albon as the fastest teammate he's ever had before F1. I didn't expect that. Do you rate Alex? Yeah, I always rated Alex. And I remember I did that video several years ago now. It was based on some footage that Red Bull put out of him testing at Silverstone. And I think I entitled it something like, you know, this is why Alex Albon is seriously quick. And it was a head-on shot of him going into Copse. And it was just a beautiful transition from, you know, straight line, steering input, quite late turn in, nothing short corner about it, but just beautifully done. And that's what Alex Albon's greatest thing is. He's got a lovely sensitive touch, footwork and handwork. He's really good. I'm not convinced that he's progressed from that over the last 3 to 4 years. I think that's what he still is. And because he relies inevitably when he's really under pressure on late braking and getting the power on soon, relatively wide entry, he's prone to mistakes, and that'll always be the case. That's the way he is. I suspect Charles Leclerc saying that after that mega battle he had with Albon in Abu Dhabi in Formula 2 finale, wasn't it? They were wheel to wheel, and I think Charles was a bit naughty there, wasn't he? And he closed the gate a few times and was basically I think he should have got a penalty for what he was doing that day. That's probably why he's now saying, oh yeah, Alex is a great driver. He probably still feels a bit guilty about that, I should think, or at least lucky that he got away with it. But I spoke a few times about being a Charles Leclerc fan. Hang on, look at this. This is these are some of my prize things here that are really very, sorry, I should get closer to the mic. Very important to me. One is, I've got to find the zip. Here it is. Here we go. Well, the first one is it's not that significant. It's just an old Williams team shirt in the days when Williams were a mega team. But here's Jim Clark 63 pair of Jim Clark 63 overalls given to me by Doug Niven, Jimmy's cousin, years ago, actually worn by Jimmy and raced by Jimmy. And here is the t-shirts that Prema put out when Charles won the F2 championship at Jerez. And there you go. Unfortunately, it's a bit too small for me, so I can't really wear it. But Charles signed it. Where's his signature? There he is, top up there. Yeah, I got him to sign it as well. The fan that I am. So yeah, always a big fan of Charles Leclerc, and I think he'll do a really good job this year. And I think he's bright enough to learn from Lewis, actually, because there were things, Lewis will be doing some things in the car that Charles never dreamt of doing, and his approach too. Charles will be looking at and learning from, and Charles is so good anyway. So, you know, that's why I keep saying I think he could go really well this year. Madeline Popper, hi Peter. What do you think about the mandatory multiple pit stops FA wants to push on Monaco? Why don't they modify the circuit instead? Well, we've kind of gone through there, but just in answer to your question, I don't think there's any way you can modify Monaco. It's so tightly fitting into the harbour there, and take the chicane out. It's not the chicane that causes the problems anyway. I mean, you can't pass anywhere. Into the pool, it's too quick. Into the Rascasse, it's too tight. Into Saint-Devote, you can just about do it, but it's off camber and it's a bit wet on the left usually. And up the hill, you can't do anything. Down the hill, you can't do anything. Into the tunnel, you can't do anything. Out of the tunnel, you can't do anything. So, yeah, you know, you can't do anything on the track. So then it comes down to, do we really want to change anything anyway? Let's just accept Monaco for what it is and enjoy the race and stop bleating about it. And if anything, you know, let's be glad that we've got Monaco there, doing what it does and being what it does. Easy Cure 001, thanks for doing these talks, Peter. Love these streams. Oh, thank you very much. It's always nice to get that. So there you go. Ollie, only records, Peter. Yeah, well, I got plenty of records. I mean, those who have watched this channel a lot know that I've been very lucky over the years to get to know a lot of interesting people. And one of them is Sting, and when he went solo, I bought all these. I'd completely forgotten that was in the period when you still bought LPs. Couldn't believe it. I got lots of Sting LPs there. Great. I got and those that I've got to say, very sad to hear the news that Peter Yarrow passed away recently, who was Peter of Peter, Paul and Mary. Those that don't know Peter, Paul and Mary, fabulous American folk group, just wonderful combination of voices to produce amazing harmonies. Mary Travers, Paul Stookey, Peter Yarrow, and at a time when protest songs were important to the world and the way we thought, they were at the front of it. And they were they were next to Martin Luther King at the Lincoln Memorial, playing If I Had a Hammer, live in front of whatever it was, 100,000, 200,000 people. And anyway, Peter Yarrow just passed away, but Paul's still with us, I think. And I came across CD. Paul said, "Hey, Peter, thanks for buying my CD." I thought, wow, Paul Stookey, one of the greatest voices I've ever heard. And certainly, that's interesting. The chat just went. So I've got to, sorry, that's why I paused there. Only records, Peter. So I've got to, what do I got to do now? Open. That's interesting. So sorry about this. If you can hear me, I'm sorry that you are. There was a weird thing then, but suddenly the chat disappeared, and I couldn't get back to my YouTube page. So I'm just about to get everything back to normal, if I may. 1 second. Very odd how these things happen. This is nothing to do with the internet connection either. This is all to do with, I don't know what. Glitch City, Arizona. So there we are, browser. Let's get some chat going. It's amazing. I've had this before, this glitch with the chat. It shouldn't be there, should it? So the reason I'm just quiet now is because the chat isn't showing me where I'd got to before it just suddenly glitched out. Okay, here we go, next one. So there we go, back to normal. How about that for a quick catch? Bobbling the ball in the air, Ricky Ponting style. iRacing Aussie, speaking of Aussie, Ricky Ponting, always the best Formula One on YouTube with your live shows. Thank you very much. Do you think Flav might be trying to get some anger and passion into doing with the Colapinto saga? Also, how would the 80s Prost do in this era? Well, if he is trying to get Jack fired up, then he's completely missed the point about Jack doing. He doesn't need to be fired up that way. He can be fired up in a million other ways, like, get in the car and drive at Jack. He doesn't need that sort of political rubbish going on in the background, does he? Jack's not that sort of guy. He's just a cool, straightforward racer. And I can't think of anybody in the world who needs less firing up than Jack Doohan, actually. He's completely, Liam Lawson maybe are the current two in the grid. But those two guys are just walking animals, aren't they, when they get into race cars? Brilliant. So Flav's probably missing the point there completely, not for the first time. And how would 80s Prost do in this Formula One era? He'd do all right. No, I mean, because he was so good at, A, he's a short corner driver, so he'd always be good, be right there or thereabouts in terms of pace. And B, he very good racing driver in terms of staying out of trouble, thinking. I mean, whereas Nico Hulkenberg, for example, you know, I'm probably doing him a misservice, but he never looks as good in the last 30 laps of a race as he does in qualifying or the first 30 laps of a race. Whereas Prost had the ability to be thinking only of the last 30 laps of a Grand Prix long before the start. And that's one of the great things about Prost. I don't go along with this professor business, all that stuff. That he was never known as a professor when he was actually driving. I think Murray started it all, but you know, he was never known as the professor amongst drivers or people involved in the sport. And he wasn't that technical, actually. And I remember, you know, 93, when he took over the 14B, he never really got on top of what the whole active thing was all about and how to get the best from it. So, and I know that for a fact. So if he was the great professor, he would have been absolutely on top of it and doing things that Nigel never did, but it was the opposite. So, I just think, you know, he would be good because he's a short corner, very mega driver. That was it. Simple. That's not complicated. Zishan Asfar. Peter, what do you think happened to Vettel in terms of his driving towards the end of his career? Did he get slower or just struggle to adapt to new regs? No, I think he, I mentioned this before, but I don't think he got slower. I think he was the same driver. He never got any better, I think is more the point. And I think he always had a sort of exaggerated sort of diamond approach to a corner. If the corner lent itself to it, that's where he was really, really good. He was good at sort of extending the straight, going into a, not necessarily short corners, just going into a rotation point and then doing that really well at exactly the right moment and then getting a really good exit. And that he did really well when he had a lot of downforce at the back of the Red Bull. But when they changed the regs and the downforce went away from the back, that's when he started to struggle because he didn't have any other way of driving. And he just became an ordinary racing driver then, a little bit like Oscar Piastri's an ordinary racing driver now, in the sense that it looks as if he's decided not to pursue the short corner route. And that's when, you know, he should have, in my opinion, if he'd been properly managed, somebody should have said to him, this is now showing up a shortcoming in your repertoire. Look, Daniel Ricciardo's blowing you away at Red Bull. You need to work on your ability to, you know, how you're going to rotate the car when you don't have all that grip at the rear. But he didn't do that. He just thought, oh, I had enough of this. I'm going to Ferrari. I'm mega world champion. I can 4 times world champion. I can win there. And so he just sort of stagnated, I think, after that and never got any better. And I think he's the same driver now. And if you give him a good back end, obviously a decent front end, he's always going to be very good. But if you've got a light back end, a bit like Jenson Button, forget it. Raging Bull, watching from Melbourne. You, David Coulthard and Eddie Jordan are the only Formula One people I watch. Oh, I'm in great company there, I think. Old DC and EJ. Yeah. I've had many a fun time with DC, actually. Really good bloke. I mean, I knew him really well when he was racing. Haven't seen much of him recently, to be honest, I have to say, but a very good man. And had a lot of fun times with him away from the track. He was very kind as well. Often gave me lifts home in his aircraft. Speaking of which, that shunt in Toronto, very, very, I hope nobody, you know, is more than critically injured and they recover. And it's, what I'm saying is amazing that there were just injuries and wasn't worse. But all credit to Bombardier. What a company. Got a lot of time. I got a Bombardier model up there. Funnily enough, Air Canada, Air Alliance, Bombardier. Massive fan of that company, which I think they bought Canadair, did they not? And it goes back to Mansour doing the first carbon composite executive jet. Great company. Tom Lynn Bish says, it was unwatchable due to Jack Whitehall. There you go. To each their own. I'm sure there are many millions of Jack Whitehall fans out there, I guess. Wilf's Wanderings. Hi, Peter. Good to see you back. I'd love to see the top you have from the great Jim Clark. Will you be able to include it in the video soon? Love the stories behind the old era. Well, I've got it here. So I'll show it again. This was recently on display in the Toronto F1 exhibition, and you can see there he actually bought it from, maybe Les gave it. It's a Les Leston did all the safety equipment then, and it's a Les Leston Dunlop blue top, as worn by Jimmy, the great Jimmy, as you say. And I've got so much Jimmy stuff. Almost some things I'm reading through them. Actually, some of them are telexes that I wrote to Carlos Reutemann. And there's one of them here, actually. So let me just read that one. I just came across the other day and sent it to a friend. And it's only because I'd also kind of forgotten how involved in Carlos's life I was. Listen to this. 1 second. Finding it now. Here we go. How do we make that bigger? Here we go. This is a telex from me to Carlos. Funnily enough, on Christmas Eve, 1981. So he's just decided that he is going to race again in 82 for Williams. And I say, dear Carlos, Marlboro say they have an option on you for 82, which they will be taking up. It's $100,000 if you're driving for Williams and $80,000 if you're driving with anyone else. That's interesting, isn't it? And then I say, I suspect that we can renegotiate all of that. But John Hogan isn't in the office at the moment for Christmas, and I'll telex again when I've spoken to him. Note the word telex there, because this was all sent into a telex machine, which meant you had to choose every word perfectly. Every letter had to be perfect. You couldn't correct on a telex machine. Then so one of the mechanics has left and is now working in America. So your other mechanic will be Brian, who's very good. You remember him, will be on your test car. John Salmon, the ex-McLaren and Brabham mechanic, will be your race spare car chief mechanic. It's so nice to be talking about spare cars, isn't it? And then I've said 08, this is chassis 08, will not be ready for South Africa, the South African Grand Prix. So your race car will be 0716. And so 08 means the new car, the 82 car, won't be ready for South Africa. So your race car will be 0716, which I think was the car that Alan Jones won Vegas with, which Johnny Williams now owns. And your spare car will be 0714. Amazing how I knew all that, eh? Keke will have chassis 15. That's Carlos's new teammate, obviously replacing Alan Jones, who's gone to the Haas team. Teammate Patrick Tambay. You are booked at the Kyle Army Ranch, and it is suggested that you be at the circuit on the afternoon of Tuesday, January 12th. So that's the Tuesday before the Grand Prix. Brilliant, eh? Why? The circuit is booked for the whole week, and the spare car will be used for all the testing. Wonderful. All that testing in South Africa. On January 18 and 19, you can bed in the race car. Don't forget that you also need a visa for South Africa. I wasn't going to get involved in that one. Just let him sort it out. There's also a Goodyear tire test booked at Rio on January 26, 27. This may be changed to Buenos Aires, and it's up to you whether or not you want to drive there. Best wishes for Christmas, Peter. Yeah, just made me think, wow, great times I had with Carlos. Similar thing with Nigel, actually. I suppose today the drivers have managers that do all that stuff, but I just did it as a friend. I was writing for Autocar at the time, just a journalist. You know, Carlos and I got on well. Another super chat here. Hi, Peter. Glad you're getting settled. I hate moving. Do you think the current downturn in EV sales and manufacturers reevaluating their EV plans will affect Formula One's commitment to going more and more electric? I hope so. Don't we all want more adrenaline and revs and power and noise and rubber on the road? I think we do. Why is that? Is everybody stopping buying Teslas now after the US elections? Is that it? I don't want to get too contentious there. I think the Tesla sales are massively down in Europe, aren't they? Or is it, I don't know what. I was reading the other day that German car companies are way behind on production to meet the demand of EV in Germany. So I'm not sure it's all to do with people going off EV. I think it's more that EV's happening so quickly that nobody can keep up. Is it maybe that? Or maybe it's just the poor infrastructure. Anyway, will it affect Formula One? Well, actually, it's interesting you asked that question because I didn't actually copy it, but there's a thing Oh yeah, here we go. The FIA provided an update on regulatory drafting processes for the 26 regulations with an increased focus on Section C, the technical regulations, obviously. The Commission highlighted the contribution of all teams and power unit manufacturers in refining aerodynamic performance and ensuring more efficient energy management. Well, in other words, it means nothing. They're still working on it. I think that's what that means. So yeah, they're still working on it. But I can't imagine they're going to come away now at this late stage from going 50% electric. Marius Duplessis, I agree. Jack Whitehall was atrocious. Sean M says, looks lovely. Thank you very much, Sean. And as for moving, I've only moved 150 meters down the road from where I was, which actually made it quite easy because just carrying stuff up and down, and I had a few, obviously, family and friends helping as well, which was great. And we rented a van, which was great. So that's not hasn't really been that bad. It's just unpacking a lot of stuff that I had in storage and going through all those files. So many files, papers. When I think about the big events of my life, it was autocar. There's a lot of stuff to do with autocar there, which is a brilliant time of my life. I loved it. And all the time I was at autocar, every year I had a new road test car, ranging from an Alfetta to the Fiat 131 Mirafiori Sport to a Mark I Escort with twin Webers, Spitfire, TR7, you name it, I drove it. I was so lucky in that period. Then there was the whole, if you like, Frank Williams friendship period, which began in 78. Really, I was very close friends with Frank by 78. But in 78, he invited me to lunch at the Steering Wheel Club in London, opposite Sterling's old house, or new house, a house he still has, the family still has, I think. And with Steering Wheel Club, which no longer exists, sadly, it was a great club. And Frank said, look, I'm rebooting my team. The future for sponsorship is the Middle East. I'm going to sell them the best in the West is to be with Frank Williams in Formula One. We're going after Saudi Arabian Airlines and a lot of other companies there, and I want you to help me do that. So I did that as a journalist for Autocar. And I worked with Frank a lot. And I think, I've still got a lot of roots there in terms of Saudi Arabian Airlines, for example. And I did all that stuff. And then concurrently, I was effectively managing Carlos. So that was a whole lot of more paper and telexes. And then I met Nigel, and then that was a whole new saga as well. And then it went on from there. So many sagas. It's all there, all this paperwork. And I was thinking, oh, there's one of my diaries, or notes actually. I used to have a new notebook at every race. And I thought, oh, that's great. I could possibly, put all those into print and do a diary. And then sort of 5 crates of notebooks later, I'm thinking, no, that ain't going to happen. I'm lucky in a way that we've got YouTube because it's like a TV station that you can basically do what you want with. And secondly, and it's free. And secondly, people like me of my age with all this stuff can say, well, I don't have to sit down and write books now. I can just do YouTube, which is a lot easier. To nearly 2 o'clock here. That's okay. Ollie, Peter, WRC is definitely some of the most competitive racing. What are your thoughts regarding safety in the sport since Kubica's crash? Yeah, I think a lot of credit to Michelle Mouton and the team there. She was an incredible driver in her own right as well for Audi and the Quattro. And she's done a lot of work on the safety side for rallying. And when you look now at what they do, the spectator control, they're very strict now. If there's any suggestion that a spectator is the wrong side of a fence or there's a group of people where they shouldn't be, they just stop the stage immediately, cancel the stage often. And that's that. And then for the drivers, obviously there are trees and there are gullies and mountain tops and everything else. But those cars are just unbelievable cars. I wouldn't say they're 100% safe, but they're just, it's just basically a crash structure in which they got 4-wheel drive and 5-speed gearbox, and they just amazing piece of engineering. And what I love about rallying is that they are basically cars, as distinct from these, as a lot of people have said, these huge Formula One cars now, which are big and heavy. Yes, they look dramatic, but it's just as dramatic to watch Kalle Rovanperä climbing into a Toyota, Rally 1 and driving out of the service area onto the public road listening to him go through the gears and then watching him on the stage. I mean, in the same car. I just love that concept. And that's what we don't get in Formula One, of course. And Formula One are not very good at sharing their drivers outside the cockpit of a Formula One car, whereas in rallying, you see them on the public road, you see them doing all sorts of things. You see them on the recce's in normal road cars. These guys, and I kid you not, I have absolutely no doubt at all that Kalle Rovanperä, for sure Terry Neuville, I would imagine Adrian Formeau, probably Elfyn Evans, all could have been very successful in Formula One if they'd made the switch at the right time. They all have the talent, absolutely no question. And Terry, of those four, is the short corner driver of the four, for sure. Marius Duplessis, what do you make of FIA and Christian Horner being booed last night? Were they? Oh, that's very rude. Why? FIA have been given us the World Championship since 1950, so why were they being booed? A and B, Christian Horner's won 1 million Grand Prix and given us Red Bull in all its glory. Why is he being booed? Don't get any of that. You know, people should have how can we do it? That it's a bit like a sort of head-up display. You need to have a thing every morning, I think. Wouldn't it be, let me rephrase it, wouldn't it be good? I would love to have a head-up display every morning which just said, be nice. So, and if we all had that everywhere in the world, wouldn't the world be a better place? I'd like to think it would. The other way of looking at it is that if you're a caddy for a golf pro, I'm sorry to refer to golf, but it is such a great sport. If you're a caddy for a golf pro and he shanks his first ball off the tee of the British Open and then has to hit 3 off the tee, and then the third ball goes just to the edge of the fairway and he puts it in the bunker and goes to the second tee with an 8 on his card, the caddy doesn't say to him, that was ridiculous. What are you doing? You're supposed to be a golf pro. I could hit the ball better than you could. The caddy instead says, don't worry about it. Put it behind you. You can still do a great score today. Just learn from it. Everything's going to be okay. Isn't that what the caddy says? Isn't that the voice we want in our head all the time through life, as distinct from saying, oh, isn't this terrible? Wasn't that terrible? And this was awful. And oh, Monaco, there's not enough overtaking. Let's just be positive about everything. Evolution 3, Peter, will Alonso drive an Aston Martin Honda? Let's see. What you're saying is, will he be there in 26? If Fernando's going to do with it, he will be. Wow, imagine of all the disappointments Fernando's had, not driving an Adrian Newey, full 100% Adrian Newey car would be the one that takes the cake, I would imagine, if he has to leave at the end of 25. And he'll be pushing Adrian like crazy to make sure he's in the car for 26, for whatever reason he'll give. And the Strolls will probably go along with that, I would imagine. It's interesting that they've, Andy Cowell, it's bad news for everybody else, and Andy Cowell's team principal of Aston Martin, because he's a very, very good man, Andy Cowell. Ex-Ilmor, ex-Cosworth, ex-Mercedes powertrain, and now team principal. And I suspect that's probably Adrian as well, seeing how good a man Andy Cowell is, and he would have known him anyway, saying to the Strolls, yep, this is the guy. Because he's an easy guy to deal with, and he'll listen to Adrian and everything Adrian says. So that's what's happening there. Edison Yepes, hi Peter from Boston. What's your thoughts on Juan Pablo Montoya's son in Formula 2 this year? Yeah, Sebastian, he's good. I think he's very good, and I'd love to see him do well. It's a cliche, isn't it? I'd love to see him do well. What does that mean? I think he will do well. With all these things, it kind of depends on budget, because to do really well in Formula 2, the driver needs to do a lot of testing away from Formula 2 in whatever it is, in last year's, in a 4-year-old Boyo Dallara Formula 3 car, whatever it is. You really need to keep sharp and be on top of everything. And whether they got the budget to do all that, as well as pay all the F2 bills, is another matter. I don't know. But in my opinion, he's quick, and I think he's quite capable of being very, very good. Got a lot of time for him. Drives a bit like his dad too. Nothing short corner about young Montoya. How is the Lotus going, Simon K? Yeah, well, I've got three Lotuses actually. I've got a Lotus Cortina, which is actually nearly finished now. 66 Mark 1 Lotus Cortina. It's in England. I've got a red 65 Elan S3 Coupe XE and Scott Watson, which Jim Clark has driven a few times, which is also in England, and it's just about to come to Spain and sit on the grass here outside and have some sunshine. And the third one is the yellow Elan that Jimmy actually owned in 67. It's an S3 Coupe as well, but with a longer final drive. Nice, really nice car, left-hand drive as well, made for, because Jimmy was living in France that year. And that is in the Jim, if it's not in the Jim Clark Museum right now, it often is, and it goes out on the road doing quite a lot of promotional shows and events in Scotland for the Jim Clark Trust. And it's looked after by Dougie Niven, who gave me those overalls, and still has a farm just like Jimmy did. And he's got the Elan there in a barn, and when it's not in the museum. And he's also got an Elite, an original Elite, which he drives around as original Elite should be driven around, with straw and hay and chickens and buckets and stuff everywhere. Doing a good job in the Elite. And that's Dougie Niven, who's Jimmy's cousin and good man, all-round good man. Used to have a place in Spain here, actually, and plays a lot of golf, so doubly good man. Another super chat. Read Adrian Newey's book, Lovely Words About You. Really? Oh, that's very kind of Adrian. Glad to join in on your Formula One ramblings. Looking for ramblings. Is that what they are? They are. I'm rambling. Looking forward to the 6 rookies this year. Glad to have you back. Thank you very much, Aaron. Very nice. And thank you, Adrian. Yeah, good man, Adrian. Top man. Good race engineer. Here we are. The newest member of the team. Race engineer, Adrian Newey. Will be working with aerodynamicist Ross Brawn. That's the Haas team. How did the Haas team do that well that year? Drivers, Patrick Tambay, Alan Jones, serious drivers. Didn't do that well. Good car, obviously. Neil Oatley, beautiful car. Adrian, Ross, John Bulban. But engine wasn't very good, the Ford engine. So didn't really shine. Dejan Z, or Z. Hi, Peter. What do you think about the Aston Martin chance to moving forward this season? Yeah, definitely. You know, let's read it again. Adrian Newey. Race engineer, responsible for chassis setup, tuning at the races. From the University of Southampton, he went to March Engineering, worked on IndyCar, IMSA, and Formula 2. Newey spent 85 in America as race engineer on Bobby Rahal's IndyCar, and in the first half of 86, guided young Michael Andretti to the top of the IndyCar points table. There you go, there's a link between Adrian and Michael. Next thing, Adrian will be working for Cadillac. There you go. Yeah, so Adrian Newey, race engineer. Forget all this aerodynamicist stuff. So therefore, Aston Martin should be better this year, shouldn't they? That's where I'm getting around to saying. Soronax at Evolution 3. That would be a great story in itself if Fernando can just win one race with an Adrian-designed Honda car. Yeah, be amazing, wouldn't it? N463. Williams is more accommodating to interviews. Have you ever fancied one with Carlos? Quite an intelligent and polite young man. You can watch. Well, I've done lots of interviews with Carlos. Look at my channel, particularly when he's in Formula 3. And yeah, I will chat. You know, I don't find Williams very accommodating, though, to be honest. I don't know if it's because I'm part of the old guard at Williams and they're kind of suspicious of me. But when I was with Nigel there we were at the Williams factory, actually, doing a charity event together last summer. I found the new regime very unaccommodating. And I don't expect anything, but I expected a bit more respect for Nigel, which wasn't there either. So I have my doubts about the new Williams being accommodating. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I haven't got that experience myself. You were talking about Haas. Okay, so Murray too. Yeah, Murray was, at that time, which was what, 85, 86, Murray was slightly going off the boil, wasn't he? He'd done he was at McLaren then, wasn't he? His great years in Formula One were over, but yeah, Gordon was at his best in the mid-70s, late 70s. That's Formula One wise, obviously, road cars, another matter. Which driving style will suit the 26 regs, or which drivers will be the most comfortable? Well, yeah, people often talk about that, and we often get questions along these lines. And they kind of, reminds me of Daniel Ricciardo saying, these new cars, difficult, different style of driving or whatever was going on at that point. Although I do go on about short corners, some people might think I do, and maybe when I try to explain why a driver has a feel for short corners and has the ability to create them, and the explanation of that is quite complicated. In reality, I always follow the Ross Cheever recipe for motor racing success, which is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think the answer to this question is that a great Grand Prix driver will always be quick, whatever he's driving, even in a Gogomobile, three-wheeler Gogomobile, he'll always be quick. So I can't tell you, and I imagine short corners are still going to be quicker than long corners. So that's it. What can I say? The only other thing I would say is that if they are generating a massive amount of downforce, then the Nigel Mansell principle comes into play, which is that there is a threshold over which you have to step in order to get the next level of downforce. Going into Copse Corner, good example. And some drivers may not. Well, I think today actually that step will be pretty mild, because the engineers will say, well, yeah, it's fine, do it. The car may feel funny, but just keep your foot flat. It'll be okay. And once you get the extra downforce, whatever. And they'll just go through, because the simulator will tell them it's possible. So I don't think it'll be any different. I think the great drivers will still be great drivers, and the midfield will still be pretty good because of all the techniques they have from which to learn. Im Rivendell, sorry if I missed it, but do you think Liam has a chance, or will he turn out as Gasly, Albon, late Perez? We haven't missed it. We haven't talked about Liam very much. Absolutely has a chance to win a Grand Prix in 2025. And I think he will win a Grand Prix in 25. I think he's quick enough, and I think the team will be good enough. And Max won't be brilliant in every race any more than any of the others will be in every race. So I think he's quicker than Perez. I would say at the moment, Albon's probably a little bit more accurate and a little bit softer with his inputs. But Liam makes up for that with Alonso-like footwork and car control. And I mean, if he turns out as good as Gasly, he'd be quite happy, I would have thought. There's nothing wrong. What you mean, I suppose, is Gasly got the sack from Red Bull. But he didn't. He left Red Bull to go to Renault, didn't he? And Gasly's very good, and I think he's going to be very good this year. So, as I say, if Liam's as good as Gasly, he'll be delighted. BSTR-CT, when you look at Hamilton, Magnussen, Ricciardo, and even Piastri, this gen of car seems harsher on drivers who find lap time on the brakes. Well, I don't think Lewis has ever found lap time on the brakes, ever. Lewis has never been a late breaker in terms of getting his lap time. He's a late breaker in the sense that he breaks late, but he's not. That isn't the thing he relies on to be quick. Magnussen, Ricciardo, I would say. Piastri, second half of 24, yes, because he started to try to see what Lando was doing. But I don't think. I think this car's been quite good at differentiating between drivers with finesse and feel for short corners and doing it right compared with other eras. The only exception, of course, being Mercedes, who managed to get the car so unwieldy and poor that even a guy like Lewis couldn't drive it. So, but that's not a reflection on this generation of car, I don't think, really. I think it's always been pretty much the same. I mean, if you think about, I don't know, Jochen Rindt in the Lotus 72, couldn't drive that initially for the first 3 or 4 races, could he? Chapman did get it right, though, unlike Mercedes. So I was trying to think about other eras, which, no, I think, again, let's not overcomplicate it. A racing car is ultimately a racing car. It's still going to have a limit at the front, a limit at the back. It's still going to have traction issues. It's still going to have speed through the air issues relative to downforce, and it's going to have weight distribution issues, and geometry with the way the wheels sit on the road. So I don't think we should read in too much about this generation of cars requiring a specific style or being tough in a specific area. I mean, if we'd gone to cast iron brakes, and this is where one of the areas where I disagree with Ross Brawn, and we'd increased the length of the braking area, and he thinks we wouldn't have, that's the point, but I think we would have had we done that, then I think maybe this car would have rewarded drivers like Lewis more. There would have been more he could have done with it. That's about the only thing. But then we've had carbon brakes and unbelievably short braking areas with very, very high pedal pressures for a number of years now. So there's nothing new there. Moomy, do you think some of the midfield teams will be getting top 5 finishes more regularly this year, given the closeness of the grid last season, assuming that continues? Definitely. Yep. I think the whole grid will be closer, and I think the top 4 will be closer as well, because we're at the end of the regulations, and there is, in theory, a limit to what you can do with these cars. Obviously, how you run them, how you drive them are still huge variables, and there'll be other variables that come to play too. But as we saw the back end of 24, you know, suddenly Sauber didn't look too bad right at the end, did they? And so if things are going to change from race to race. The key to the championship is obviously to be a very high level of average performance and not to be affected race to race from various types of circuit, whether a top speed circuit or a high downforce circuit or a reliability circuit or one that's bound to be wet. Mouse down, who's Dexter's favorite driver? Right now, interestingly, it's Kalle Rovanperä. He saw Rovanperä's video the other day of his new kit with the flames and stuff, and he started barking and, you know, scratching. I kind of support that. I'm a Rovanperä fan too. But if you're talking about Formula One, he's a little bit bored with Formula One. Tends to sleep a lot when the Formula One's on, but when the rallying's on, he's, you know, chasing balls and stuff. Gitanshi, hi Peter, hi there. Bear like X, salute Peter. My view on the launch, it was cringy, but I guess they have to entertain the marketing companies. But it's interesting you say that, because the reason they never used to do these communal launches is because none of the teams or sponsors wanted to be seen in the same planet as the other teams and sponsors. They all wanted to do their own thing. I suppose that all began in the cigarette era. And the last thing Marlboro needed was to be next to a BAT or a Camel or whatever. But I can remember Ron Dennis, you know, saying, we do launches better than anybody else. There's no way in the world we would ever put our car next to a Ferrari or a Williams. Sorry, I shouldn't be doing that. Next to a Ferrari or a Williams. Because we're McLaren. We don't need to be in somebody else's glory. We do our own thing. We do it better than anybody else. And that was the way the teams always thought. Now, there's a bit of a sea change. And I think that's happened because the launch itself doesn't really exist for the teams anymore. They don't do the big Ron Dennis launches anymore, or the Colin Chapman launches, or even the March Engineering launches with the car by the back of the factory next to the garbage tin. They don't do any of that stuff. They do these renders that go out on the internet, and then they run the car on the racetrack. So I suppose for all the teams, it's quite a convenient thing to have this livery launch, because they don't have to get the car built, and they can just stand there and say to their sponsors, look, we've just got another 500 million people to watch your logo worldwide. So that's why it's happening now, I guess. Marketing companies, yeah. I don't know, what is a marketing company? Not quite sure. Zijan Asfla. Peter, who to your knowledge was the most promising Formula 2 driver that didn't make the cut in Formula 1? Wow, there's so many, actually. It's so sad to say that, isn't it? It's terrible. I mean, in recent past, I would say both Theo Pourchaire and Fred Vesti should be in Formula 1. I think Davide Valsecchi was very, very good. Very good. And he just, you know, he never got the chance, did he? That Lotus thing never happened, and I think he was good. There's so many I can't let's do it properly. Do you mind if I just have a look at all the Formula 2 champions so I have a better answer for you? I've mentioned those guys, obviously, because they spring to mind, but there will be others, for sure. Let's have a look at recent champions. See who... Where are they? Yeah, champions in the world. Well, Felipe Drugovich would be another one, definitely. It would be another one that I'd put in there. It's crazy. And I think Markelov, the Russian, was very good too. Needed to obviously be a bit more serious and disciplined, but he was very talented driver, amazingly talented. Very sad, stupid that he's not in Formula One, actually. I suppose the Russian thing I mean, once Ukraine happened, I suppose there was no chance for him, but he was really good, I thought. Dacia. What was all that firecracker and music? Just put the V10 engine noise and that's it. Yeah, you're right. Wouldn't that have been good? Have some V10s revving in the background. Actually, 75, they should have had recordings of every Formula One engine note that's been there since for the last 75 years. That would have been cool, wouldn't it? Where are we? Gitanchi. Personally, I don't like the dark red, almost maroon kind of colour of the Ferrari this year. Looks better when it's more vermilion. Yeah, I agree with you. They've done that a few times. Even in the Marlboro era, they started playing around with the shade of red. Don't touch it. Just make it that nice bright red with a bit of blue on it. Perfect. Yeah, all that dark stuff. That comes from... I think there was a time when, even when Enzo Ferrari was with us, that they went to that darker red. I think that's what it's all about, and they're trying to reflect. If you look at sort of... if you look at the 51 4.5 litre Ferrari that won the British Grand Prix in the hands of Gonzalez, then I think you'll find that's a darker red as well. And probably that's because that 75 thing, they're going back. We'll conveniently forget, of course, that Ferrari didn't actually start the first Grand Prix of 1950, the British Grand Prix, because they didn't think they were being paid enough money. But interesting, that red, I mean, Alfa Romeo have got that red too, that darker red, which is odd, isn't it? Because the bright red is so nice. And interestingly, the Rovanpera Toyota GR road car, the mega road car, has also got a sort of weird dark red instead of a brighter red. Hyundai got it right though with their red, didn't they? The reddy orange, beautiful. Smoke too much. What an absolute smoke too much. What an absolute cringe fest it was. And who thought it would be a good idea to have that idiot host Whittle? Now come on, let's be nice. Please be nice. I'm sure he's a great guy. Don't be nasty. Come on. Westerly Storm 99. Peter, the FIA have already issued the first new rule, 10k cursing fine. Guess what, to a rally driver? Okay. Yeah, I think I actually heard that on the thing. Well, I don't think it was Taka either. Who was it? I think it might have been Elfyn Evans, actually. Terrible. Terrible. Again, I blame the team. I think, I blame the people around the driver who are constantly saying, no, you can't talk to him. No, you're not allowed to do this. No, go and blow your nose. Those people should be saying, don't say these words in public. The drivers get emotional. It's not like, well, it is like other sports. In other sports, they do have people controlling that. And the teams need to take far more responsibility. Erwin Greben, Mercedes also ran with Sauber in the 80s in the World Sports Car Championship, were not unbeatable. And the DTM, the same thing. Yeah, I was referring to Formula One, of course, but you're right. They had all that funny period there. Mind you, they did give us Michael Schumacher from that, didn't they? But then they had those ridiculous shunts with poor Mark Webber at Le Mans when... I think after the first one, he actually rang Adrian, didn't he, from Le Mans and said, this is what's happened. And Adrian said, well, do this, do that. Probably, I don't know, put a splitter on or do whatever it was. And they didn't do it. And then he had another one. Terrible. Bear Like X has got a solution for this whole Monaco thing. He says, replace it with South Africa. Well, why replace it? I think we should replace some of the other circuits which will remain nameless with South Africa. We want South Africa, but why do you want to replace Monaco? It's just the most beautiful race. the harbour, the golden sunshine of the Côte d'Azur, the Hotel de Paris. Admittedly, there's a bit too much bling and a bit too much, noise now when the cars aren't running. But we know what it is. It's a processional race that's there because it's Monaco. And when you go there, if you don't like the racing, just relive the moments when Jack Brabham won his first Grand Prix there with his feet suffering third-degree burns in the Cooper, or Sterling Moss scored his greatest win there in 61, or Graham Hill in 65, or so many others. And Erwin Greven agrees with me. Never get rid of Monaco. Thank you, Erwin. Good stuff. Adam Fretter says it was difficult to watch. I think he's talking about the 75 thing at the O2. Yeah, shame. Adam Fretter says, and the so-called music artists. Well, as I say, what's wrong with Johnny Clays and the Clay Pigeons? He was a Grand Prix driver, Johnny. And we could have just had that music in between. Somebody could have explained what it was all about, had a nice big picture of him up there. And then, up and away. Fifth dimension. KCB 5150. My point of view about Monaco these days is that it is the lie detector for the mechanics, pit wall and strategy of a team. How many times have teams blown the deal with awful decisions or sloppy stops? I agree. It is that, but then it's also a dangerous place to be making pit stops. Very dangerous place. It's a chaotic place. And I'm not sure it's fair to put all that pressure on the mechanics yet again. Very long season, incredibly difficult working conditions at Monaco, particularly if it's wet. And you want them to do what, 3 pit stops instead of the 1? As well as all the other stuff that comes into play at Monaco? I don't think that's right. Black Pudding TV, the Aston Martin rollout was very moving with Thames singing. Yeah. And didn't they do a thing with, James Bond and the Aston? Yeah. Rizal, is it true that the FAA decided to introduce 2 mandatory pit stops? Well, they're trying to. Yeah, we're talking about that. They're talking about this World Motorsport Council approving this decision now. I'm not sure it's 2, it's more, maybe 3. Bistar CT Monaco. I think you kind of agree. It's a unique event. We need more of them. Rally Sweden, Finland and Norway are all completely different, and different drivers do better each time. That's the beauty of it. Totally agree. Very, very good. I mean, what an amazing thing. We had the Rally of Sweden in the snow and ice, and the fireworks at night, and the Red Barn Arena, and the jumping. And now we're going to the Rally of Kenya. Talk about, 2 extremes. Just brilliant. Loved every minute of the Rally of Sweden. I listened to it in Japanese, actually. The Rally TV is brilliant. They've got all these different languages. You can listen to the commentary. And I learned that his pronunciation is Katsuta. It's not Katsuta. It's Katsuta. Very good. Loic Emmett. What if the chicane after the tunnel was pushed back to make the braking area more critical whilst keeping some runoff? Well, I don't know, maybe. Maybe. It's still very tight, that entry, isn't it? The guy on the inside, the outside is effectively, you've still got to give you a massive amount of room to let you inside, and it's all messy. I just sit there behind, call it a processional race. It's defined by qualifying, Don't play around with it. Think about Princess Grace, think about Frank Sinatra, Jimmy Stewart, think about Peter Ustinov. Have fun on the grid, do a bit more on the grid, make the whole grid thing longer, have more movie stars, whatever you want. Don't play around with the race. It's always going to be what it is, a procession. Moomy, Monaco doesn't always deliver on Sunday, sure, but Saturday's always great fun to watch, has a great history. Yeah, exactly what I'm just saying. qualifying is mega at Monaco. It's very, very nail-biting, Monaco. And so is the opening lap as well, up the hill. I still think up the hill at Monaco on the first lap, is the most dangerous moment in Formula One racing, because of I hate to say it, the possibility of wheels interlocking and one of the cars going over. I mean, it's still there. And, Monaco is a very dangerous Grand Prix. We should never, ever take it for granted in that respect. Into the pool, unbelievably quick. Into Casino Square, unbelievably quick. And, it's got a lot of things that challenge a driver. It's not just a boring race. And all that stuff about, what lap time are they doing on lap 15? Oh, they're 10 seconds off the pace. Doesn't matter. This is Monaco. Live with it. Paul Gilbert, Monaco 68 was my first Grand Prix. I was 12. Yeah, brilliant. How old was I? My first Monaco Grand Prix. It was the first Formula One Grand Prix I ever saw. and I was 14. And I watched it from the station hairpin. I watched practice from the chicane and watched it from the station hairpin. And the chicane then was quick. It was a quick corner. And Lorenzo Bandini was killed the year I was there. Imra Vendel. I like Monaco because it's a track with no room for mistakes. A great qualifying session can be more exciting than a dull race, and let's say something like Barcelona. Yeah, and we've had plenty of dull races at other circuits as well. I mean, come on. And don't forget, Monaco still, I keep repeating, it still throws up a pretty serious option of rain as well. So, you know. So there we go. Im Rivendell says, if mandatory pit stops are needed for Monaco, it surely would mean they would drive faster and take more risks, no? Regardless of tyre life, you want to get the most out of it. I'm not convinced about that. I think they would just, whoever's at the front of the race is going to control the pace and try to go as slowly as possible and extend the stint or something like that, wouldn't they? Isn't that what they'd do? And then if you're behind, wanting to take risks and go faster, you can't because the guy in front's going slowly. Edwin Griven, Monaco is indeed all about Saturday. Drivers squeeze the maximum performance in one lap. Remember Alonso and Verstappen at the end of the session. Yes, no mistake in 78 laps. Exactly. And I think you know, seeing those veins popping on the forehead after qualifying make life worth living, do they not? Okay, I'm going to have to wind it up there, guys. Thank you so much. We got another super chat though. I'm just going to read that one. Hi Peter, glad you're getting settled. I hate moving. Oh, we pumped that one. Sorry. See if there's any others that I've missed. Yeah, done that. Now, oh, one more. This is from 0083. Monaco is boring. Okay. Well, you know. Have you watched the movie Rear Window recently? Because it starred Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart. And when you see that movie, you think, or High Society for that matter, you think of what she then did and how she took Monaco and became this blossom event because of her and her glamour. And then all the things that we had at Monaco. Yes, I mean, don't forget, for a long time, they only allowed 16 cars on the grid at Monaco because they felt it was too difficult for overtaking. That was in the 60s. 16 cars. You know, didn't even have the 20 cars we have today. And they still loved it. So what's changed? Why do we expect so much more from Monaco now? Adon Bilivit. He finishes this with a nice comment. Thank you very much, Adon. He says, forgot about you, Peter. Formula One is really back. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. And I'll do one more. Florina S. Hi, Peter. Seeing Lewis's enthusiasm and how he seems effectively rejuvenated, do you rate him better at winning the World Drivers' Championship? Well, I've never not rated him as winning the World Drivers' Championship. When I've been asked how well he will go this in 25, I've said I think he'll win Grand Prix. But if Ferrari have a winning car in terms of the championship, I think Charles will beat him over the season to that championship. That's all I've said. I haven't said that Lewis isn't going to be super quick and very, very successful. I think he will be. But I think if it comes down to a championship, I think Charles' length of time with the team and his general ability as well, and his ability to learn from Lewis and improve himself even more, which Charles is very good at doing. He's a very self-critical guy. I think that will add up. If Ferrari have a championship winning car, that's got to be in italics, a better car, for example, than McLaren, and that's obviously, let's wait and see, then, and I think Charles can do it. But I'm not saying Lewis won't have a great year. So a lot more questions coming in. Okay, Jeremy Crawford, what's your assessment of the World Drivers? Terry Newell seems to be struggling. Well, he struggled in... Yeah, I don't know. I think he struggled. I mean, I thought Terry drove really well in Sweden because it was the new car, and he had, for the first time, he had a lot of understeer for first time in a long period of time. And I think he was just taken aback by it on the new Hankook tyres. But what was so impressive was the way he started to drive around that and just got more and more consistent as the rally went on, to the point where he finished third. And I thought it was a fabulous drive of just learning, being self-critical, and discovering where he could go with the car. And it's still very early days, obviously, with the Hancocks. So I thought he did a great job, and best placed Hyundai finisher, obviously. And yeah, did everything that I thought he would. When he was P5 at the end of the first day, a few people were saying, "Oh, you know, what's happened?" I remember said to one of my mates, I WhatsApped, I said, "You wait, I bet you he's on the podium." And he was. So I was very pleased with that. And I think what happened in, oh, yeah, Monte Carlo, he locked up, didn't he? Going into a hairpin, just made a mistake. A bit like Mika Hakkinen after he won the 98 World Championship, beginning of 99 Australian Grand Prix, had a massive spin shunt, I think, last corner in Adelaide, in Melbourne rather. Sort of bit, you know, wow, this is a Grand Prix car again. All the festivities are over. I think a little bit of that with Terry, but he was going very quickly at Monte Carlo when he went off. It's downhill braking area. There was a bit of ice, locked up, went on, and that was it. But kept going, still finished, didn't he? But yeah, I thought he drove well. Lots of faith in him. Hopefully going up to see Martin Vigada very soon up in Andorra. Have some fun with him, with some of my 20 ends. Anyway, that's it for this one. I've got to get going. Got lots to do. Dexter's hungry. Well, something or other. Great. Yeah, I think he's hungry. And been great talking to you all and getting your reactions to the world of Formula One and F1 75, which looks about 50% of you liked and 50% of you didn't. I think that's probably a fair assessment. So yeah, thanks very much indeed for being with me for these 2 hours. We'll start to do live streams more regularly now. And this is also just a test that everything was working too, the sound and the lights and everything else. So it seems pretty good, hopefully. So thanks for being part, and see you very soon.